Welcome. This is Pivot Point, Strategy for Change. I'm Nick Michael. Today, we have someone whose story is incredibly remarkable. And I'm truly grateful to be welcoming him back for a follow-up conversation here on Pivot Point, Strategy for Change. When Vic first joined us, he shared his pivot point with extraordinary honesty. He opened up about his journey through alcoholism, the internal battles, the emotional triggers, and the moment when denial could no longer protect him from the truth of what his life had become. We talked about what it really takes to confront addiction, the fear, the resistance, the courage it takes to ask for help, and the role that support systems play in making recovery possible. Vic also reminded us of something incredibly important, that recovery isn't a single decision or a final destination, but an ongoing process of growth, accountability, and self-awareness. This conversation resonated with so many people because it wasn't polished or idealized. It was real. Today, Vic is back to share what has happened since that pivot point. We're going to talk about what recovery looks like over time, how perspective changes, and what it means to keep choosing growth long after the initial turning point. Vic, I am really glad you're here. Welcome back. Tell us about a pivot point that you'd like to address tonight.
Thank you, Nick, and it's really my pleasure to be part of this whole podcast. It's like brings things to reality for me, and I have 35 years plus in recovery, sobriety, free from all substances. It's a journey that is always continuing. And our first podcast was Hitting Bottom. And now this is sort of part 2 of Hitting Bottom, is finding your way, finding your niche to get through, to ask and seek help, which is very important. It's also, we're going to talk about a little bit about it being very generational. Because my generation, like yours, our fathers were from what we call the silent generation.
Exactly.
They're born in the 1920s, early 1900s, and I'm a baby boomer. I'm going to be 60. I'm 68 years old. Unbelievable how time goes so fast. Yet when you are in the thick of it, time seems to stand still. So we're going to talk a little bit about breaking through the barrier, what I went through being a baby boomer and finally getting to the point where I had to ask for help, get over the shame, everything and run. Now it's face everything and recover.
Well
so
put.
There's some terminology I'm going to use from the programs, from 12-step programs. And maybe a little bit of foul language once in a while, not too raw, but we keep it in reality. So thank you for having me.
No, it's wonderful to have you here. You talked a little bit about embarrassment. You talked a little bit about shame. Where do you want to begin? Where do you want to take this?
Okay, I never thought I had a problem. And again, when I started to drink, it was so much fun at first. It was so much fun, laughing, and even going to a party, you drink some Canadian Club, and you throw up on the top of your shoes, and you laugh about it, and you get over it. And in the end, it really wasn't fun anymore. And I'm from a generation where my father was he was an alcoholic. He was very strict. You didn't let anybody know what went on in your household, and you didn't let anybody in your surroundings, because it was like a wall. It was a wall of insulation there. and finally realizing once I hit a bottom where the substance was not working anymore. Spiritually, I was vacant.
Right.
Physically, I wasn't doing well. Thank God financially, I was always able to be creative and make a good living for myself. But in the end, by Monday morning, you were pretty much had enough to do to start working again, and then you're looking for the next Friday payday, and it was a vicious cycle. Substance stopped working. I was feeling really, really bad. I was chasing the bottle, and no matter how much I put in my body, I felt worse as I went on. And, there's some decisions were almost forced upon me. There was embarrassment involved. There's denial about how bad your problem really is. But when you start to get messages from other people like your spouse or your employer or people that either care about you or people that avoid you because of your actions. So there's really a lot to go over, but we're going to try and chip away a little bit at a time.
You've talked about how the substances stopped working. You've also talked about denial. And what was it like then when, at what point did you recognize, because the substances weren't working, that it was denial and that had an impact on what you did next? What was going on for you on an emotional level or even any other level
Yeah,
at
that's
that time?
that's that's what was going on. Was I was in the trade unions in the city, carpenter in New York City, and I had a very good job I landed a job as a shop steward.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't going to last that long, but it was good as a shop steward. Some responsibilities between the union and the company I worked for, and fellow tradesmen. Now I was in the Irish Union in Manhattan called 608, and drinking was a very big part of the job. Before the toolbox came on the job, we got our big blue refrigerator. We called it Big Blue. That rolled off the truck. So, when people walked on the job, they saw the refrigerator. It was like, wow, this is going to be great. I just wanted to drink and get a buzz, and I called in sick, and my wife went to work, and by the time she came home, I looked like somebody else. It was someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
My eyes were like totally glazed over. I was paranoid. I couldn't sleep. I wasn't eating well. It just, no matter how much substance I put in my system, my body chemistry changed, and it just wasn't fun anymore. Just no matter how much I put into my system, it changed me. It changed me.
Right. So bring us back then, because that sounds like a pivotal moment for you, because you physically weren't getting the same fix that you were used to getting. Emotionally, there was something missing for you. And then outwardly, you appeared very, very different from what your wife was used to seeing at the time. So, how much of that had an impact on you that contributed to you to that moment? Tell us
Well,
about that,
well, the
because
the impact was I was kind of I was given an ultimatum. I don't know what you're doing, but I kind of know what you're doing, and I can't put up with this anymore. And you have to either change or find some other place to live.
right. What was it like for you hearing that at that moment? What was going on in your mind at that moment?
Oh, it
Because
was
that
like,
sounded like a very, because here you had the person you love and cared for and cared incredibly for you was essentially giving you an ultimatum. And for many people, that doesn't, may not always work. What made it different for you? Because you've referred to this before, and I know that was a significant moment. pivotal moment for you?
Right. Well, at that point, I think I finally, because my body chemistry wasn't reacting the way it was when it was fun. It just wasn't fun anymore. And it was kind of a shock, but in other words, it was a very good wake up call for me to get over the embarrassment at the moment and say, look at this, I need help. I finally realized I needed help because my situation, my will was only the missions and ways and means to get more substance to stay in that mode.
Hmm.
And that the program was associated with a hospital, and they had therapists and counselors, and I went there every day after work for about a year and a half.
Mm.
After work every day I went there, and it it started to fall into place. And my friend took me to an AA meeting, and which was very strange at first to me because I see everybody, hugging each other and greeting
Mm.
each other, these big burly guys hugging each other. And I'll tell you a story about this meeting called Clean Streets down in Manhattan that I went to, where all these burly construction workers and sanitation workers, they're all laughing and hugging each other. And I'm saying to myself, I said, shit, this, what's up with, what is up with this? Is some
Mm.
kind of cult or something, How could these people be sober and clean and be having such a good time, having such a good time and the camaraderie? Because while you're using, as long as you have something to use at a party with or a bottle, or you're at the bar, you got money on the bar,
Yeah.
everybody's your friend.
Right. Right.
But when the money and the substance runs out, there's nobody around anymore. So these people were welcoming you with open arms instead of with the handout saying, "What are you going to give me?" And when
Mm.
that's gone, they're gone. So there was a concept there which you have to sort of fall into place and then break through the barrier about finding somebody that's willing to ask you that, would you let me help you? And there was
So
no longer embarrassment. I wasn't embarrassed anymore. I was finally getting the message that someone is willing to help me
right.
without asking for nothing, for
So
naught.
what made this moment in particular impossible to ignore?
Well, I think it was the combination of given some sort of ultimatum and just
Mm.
hitting such a bad bottom with the substance not working anymore. No matter, I mean, hundreds of dollars a day it just wouldn't get me where I wanted to go because it's all about body chemistry, and it's really about your body chemistry changing and the length of time you're in the throes of using substance.
So what were you actually then telling yourself that kept you using? Like, what was the thought process back then? Because everyone has it as this method
Well,
of rationalizing and
using,
intellectualizing and defending what they're doing. But
yeah,
the brain
yeah.
is always playing a mind game.
It is a mind game. When you're in the throes of addiction, you're strictly on a mission. Sometimes it isn't even when you finally get the substance in your system. It's the chase to go after it.
Well, tell us about that because I many years ago I worked in methadone maintenance program in the city, and it's a very challenging field for everyone, and it was a whole team that worked with everyone, and everyone I worked with, and that was receiving treatment, always referred to the thrill of the chase. That's something that many of my listeners, that's new for some of them, not all of them, some of them. What was it like then for you to have that thrill of the chase? Because there must have been a lot going on there.
Well,
I mean,
well,
what can you share with
well,
us?
like,
What did what did the thrill do for you, if you want to put it that way?
that was it was a always changing factor. Being on the job with several other people who were using, generally there was somebody had something, or there was always lunchtime at the bar, or on Friday we would have Cuckoo Juice Fridays, which would be vodka and lemonade, or mimosas. We would thought we were so happy. That's when the drinking on the job was. They really didn't frown up. Well, it was frowned upon, but now after so many lawsuits and stuff like that, compensation laws, if you get injured on the job and they find alcohol in your system or drugs in your system, they're not going to cover you for your injuries. You're going to lose your comp case.
Yeah.
The, you know, there seems more the search for it, because if your connection, let's call it a connection, if your connection dried up, or what you were doing at the time wasn't around, then you have to go on a mission,
Yeah.
and it would bring you to strange places.
Yeah. And a lot has not changed also, although much has changed in how people get their
Well, from
fix.
what
But
I know
yeah,
now, it's changed very much, because all you got to do is get on your iPhone, and
right,
they deliver, the guy
right,
delivers it, on the bicycle
right.
or whatever.
So how similar then is, or how different is the thrill of the chase then compared to now? In other words, was it more difficult, more challenging
It was
to
it
break
was much
free?
more difficult,
Okay,
right?
so tell us about that, because I think the convenience of things at the present time is what contributes for many on some level to the difficulty in taking responsibility, breaking through the denial, and then following a program. So tell us about that.
Wow, that's really a good point. Convenience, that word
Well,
convenience,
now
yeah.
I will be real in saying the refrigerator, other things popping up, that's still not a very uncommon setting for these things to still be there. And those who are involved in certain unions know what I'm talking about. So I'm not trying to give too much away, but I'm saying in that regard, that has not changed because there's a lot of use going on still. So you're living proof of someone who many, many years ago, before a level of responsibility and following a program and dealing with the male code about feeling shame and taking responsibility, going to meetings. There was a lot going on back then. A lot has changed now, and treatments programs are more available. So for you to come to this point in your life, to see this moment and then seize that moment and not lose what you potentially could have lost, your relationship, your position where you were working, your the entire world that you had at that time was really all consuming. There's so much that went on. So tell us about how that was.
Okay. We'll go with the chase thing,
Yeah.
first of all. I'm not gonna touch too much on that, because there's so many facets to this. Sometimes you would find yourself in the building on the Lower East Side, East New York, or just in
I
general,
used
and
to work in East New
you
York at
go
a
into
shelter. Yeah.
you go into a
So
basement.
I'm very familiar with that area.
Yeah, you go into a basement because you heard there's a cop spot or a good place to get some stuff. And you basically, if there's not a big burly bodyguard standing there, there's a little like hole in the wall and a little trap door, and you're putting your money in a hole in the wall, and you're hoping to get something back that's going to get you where you're going to go. Now, sometimes you can get beat, what they call getting beat. Sometimes you get what you want, right? Sometimes the cops are coming down the block. So you gotta like either run, or if you got your stuff, you now gotta dump it. Or if you got your stuff, they give you something that's beat. It could be Comet, it could be oregano, but whatever it was. So now from the thrill of the chase to almost like hitting a real wall with depression, because now gave your money up to somebody and you didn't get your substance. Or maybe you got your substance and now you got to go find a place to use it.
Yeah. Well, you're referring to higher risk altogether in every
Right.
aspect almost because
That's whole part of
yeah,
the whole part of the
right.
game. I
Yeah.
think now things have changed drastically
Yeah.
because you could just get on the internet and do a phone order, one from column B, one from column A. It's crazy. I'm glad I don't have to go through that.
Yeah. Yeah. So in your life then, what made the difference for you to continue on your program? Because many people may not feel they can connect with a traditional 12-step program.
Right. It's
And
fun.
there's a lot of aspects to it that don't click for many.
Right.
And the struggle I have had and continue to have for the people I work with and have worked with is providing the support that they need when they need more support than what they're getting from me. And they're unwilling to leave their job to go into a rehab, to go away. They're unwilling to go to a treatment program, even as an outpatient. They're unwilling to follow a program because they come up with a lot of different reasons and defenses against it. So, what can you say to someone out there who has a position, who is working, who has a family, who's functioning and using, and feels like the once a week they're coming in should be enough because they don't want to give up what they've got?
Right. Well, finding a good if you have the luxury of having an aftercare program or an EAP or even just a good therapist, but the most important part is finding a meeting in the program. It could be, you could have a trouble with drugs, alcohol, NA, Narcotics Anonymous, AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, GA, Gamblers Anonymous.
Right.
You could actually be a member of all three. And in the old days, if it was very rough in the beginning, because if you went to an AA meeting and you had some old timers there with some time and you mentioned narcotics, you actually have somebody come up and say, "You're not welcome here. We don't do that. We don't
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah.
that here.
You're out.
You're out."
Well, many times they don't. I remember 30 years ago when I started in this field, over 30 years ago, I had been working with somebody who was in recovery for maybe 10, 15 years. He was a relatively young guy in his 30s, actually. And he said, I can't let anyone know that I'm seeing you as a therapist. I can't let the people in my program because they're very old school, traditional. So a lot has changed, I imagine. So, but a
Has
lot has
changed.
probably not. And
Yes.
some of the old timers, if you want to refer to it as that.
We fall back on that generational thing. You see,
Yeah.
it all
Well, tell us
falls.
about that because when you're from a different generation, you are a baby boomer. I'm a Gen X. I'm right behind you. We have millennials and we have Gen Z. So very different. And the access to everything right now, to gambling, to anything online, to porn, to drugs, to anything,
Right,
substances, weed, everything is becoming almost legalized. Gambling is legalized now.
right.
So the impact that has had on people, how different is it from your generation, mine, to theirs? What do you
Well,
notice?
even though we're a little bit different in age,
Hmm.
but our dads were pretty much from that same
Yeah.
era. Very, very, very tough.
Hmm.
And
European. Yeah.
if you didn't do what your dad told you,
Yeah.
he'd let you know it.
Yeah.
He let you know it. My father was really rough, and he really wasn't a nice guy, but that was handed down to him too.
Mm.
Because he saw action in Okinawa at 17. He was with the Navy. He took over
Mm.
Okinawa with the Marines,
Yeah.
and he sent his combat pay home. And when he got home, he asked his mother for his combat pay, and she spent it on him. You know, his stepfather owned a beer garden, and his father was a bootlegger, and you
But
hear
now
about all the stuff.
he's entrenched in it
He's
generationally. Yeah.
entrenched, right? but the best part that happened to me is that I found a couple of groups of like-minded people
Mm.
and a good counseling center to where they called you up on your bullshit. Because believe me, and I tell the story, I didn't want to go into a counseling session because it was snowing. And my counselor said to me, he said, you'd in a snowstorm, you knock the blind guy out in the subway playing his guitar
Yeah.
and use him as snowshoes if you had to go to the bar or go to whatever you got to get. And you know what? Finally found somebody who said, wow, somebody called me up on my BS, and
And you
it's
respected them for that, though.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, and to get some, they help you break through
Right.
that wall of insulation.
What practical changes did you make in either your behavior, your mindset, or in your environment? Because that has the major impact on someone when they make those changes.
Oh,
So,
now
okay.
you're hitting,
So go there.
yeah. If you stay around the barber shop long enough, you're going to get a haircut. That's the saying. And all the sayings, you say, what are these people talking about?
Yeah.
Like the think sign is upside down. I got up in the meeting and I turned the think sign, the slogan sign, it was up. So I turned it right side up and the old guy behind me smacked me in the back of the head.
I like that story.
He said, you got upside down thinking. He said, put the sign the way it was, sit down, take the cotton out of your ears, stick it in your mouth and learn.
So now you learned from the experience of being around people and that shook you up. How does that actually happen if most that are dabbling in recovery are attending a meeting like we're doing this online or are attending a meeting just by listening, like on a phone call? So how did that make a difference for you? Because it's hard to get from people from point A to point B to get into a meeting sometimes, physically, nowadays,
Well,
sometimes.
you have,
Like if you could talk about the value to that.
yeah, the value there is, it's a change of lifestyle. Okay. And man, is it hard to change. It's very hard to change. You have to say, well, I gave up my friend. They're not your friends. You have very few friends in the world of music. You have very few friends. Your dealer isn't your friend. He's only happy to, front you some drugs till payday because he knows on payday you're going to give him what you owe him, and he's only going to keep feeding the beast. So you really have to, and that's probably the hardest part for most people today. Because first of all, today, communication is very different.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's texting, and I kind of feel bad. I kind of feel bad for the people trying to do it today. It's important. You have to break ties with the people. Can't go to the bar anymore. You can't social drink because, back to the slogans, 1,000 too many and one is never enough. It's this the slogans.
No,
You
very,
have to
very well
listen.
put. What surprised you most about yourself as you moved through your own change and transformation?
Well, I realized at one time I was probably about almost a year clean and sober, and I went to an Eric Clapton concert. And I had such a good time. I couldn't believe it. It was at the old Chase Stadium, and some guy came rolling down the concrete steps, and we were up on the bleachers. He came rolling down the steps and hit the wall right where you go down to get more beer or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at my buddy that I was with, and I was saying, gee, I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore. And we finally realized that there is a way of having a good time and it being clean and sober because it wasn't fun anymore. You don't realize that. But for the people that are listening to this today, um, don't be embarrassed. Okay, I'm just going to say, don't be embarrassed. If you have your families willing to still keep you around, that is a gift that is unbelievable, because you lose trust. Say you pilfer the bank account, you lose a job. I mean, I've lost jobs because I was using, I did my job well at managing, but I wasn't doing the paperwork, because who wants to sit down to do paperwork when I could run out to the bar? But what was going on, I was getting the work done in place and I was running the work, but the paperwork wasn't being done. And then therefore my boss couldn't bill, the company couldn't bill the owners for how many carpenters they had on a job or how much work was in place, because it wasn't documented. So finally, they kept sending me to
Mm.
these satellite jobs where there was nobody there. And when I got back to the office, I said, "Hey, you sent me to this job. There was nobody there." And they took one look at me and they said, "Well, I'm looking at you and I don't see anybody there."
They set you up. So, what would you say to someone standing at the edge of their own pivot point?
Take the leap.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Take get through. Break through your fears. Instead of F everything and run, face everything and recover. Because the benefits of that, from what I've received in being a sober man today, the gifts are, I can't even mention the gifts that I have, because if you continue to use, something bad's going to happen.
Yeah.
Something bad's going to happen.
So, how can someone recognize that a pivot point is inviting them and not punishing them? Because the stinking thinking will cause twisted thinking, twisted behavior.
That's just addiction at its best. It's cunning, baffling, and insidious. Try and read some literature. And these days it's so easy. You get an audio book
Mm.
on the 12 of 12, or there is so much recovery stuff on YouTube and podcasts like we're doing now. This is I'm trying to see. There's a line in some of the recovery books. In order to keep what you have to give it away. So from the benefits that I've reaped now, you know, a good family, a pension, several
Mm.
jobs that I've, worked for, several people that I've worked for, that every once in a while they would call me back and say, "Hey, will you come work for me again?" I say, "No, but I'm retired. I'm done."
Yeah.
Or other professional people that I know that have worked in a job for 20, 25, 30 years, they've retired. They've actually called them back with
Mm.
a waiver on, they're still collecting their pension. They called them back on a waiver to work because they can't find qualified people, or people that are focused enough as a sober professional to do the job. But it's also family. You have to think about your family. There are some people say in the writings, you got to think about yourself. And,
Yeah.
my will wasn't going to get me any place. Family is very important. And if you still have that, that's a gift. And
So,
it's a big part.
you talk a lot about family, following your program, having significant people in your life, being involved actively in therapy, changing the people and the places that you were involved with and visiting, and your environment. So, what mistake do most people make when they're facing major change? When they need to make that change, what kind of mistake do they make that you could?
It's people, places, and things.
Right.
It's a repeat. It's people, places, and things. Fear, embarrassment. You have to break, and I'm going to keep saying it. And you said it in the beginning, fear. fear and embarrassment. Embarrassment. Am I less than? Am I a true man to admit that I've got this problem? Because you have to break through it. You got to latch on to somebody that has some good recovery. You
Mm,
have to latch on to a good therapist.
right.
And people who are out there listening, if you're struggling and you still have somebody that cares about you, use that tool and just give it a chance. But you have to break away from the group that you're hanging with, that you're running with, because it's very hard to break away from that if you're still in the mix.
Yeah. So what I'm imagining then is there's a level of belief that you have to have in yourself. So, in order to do that, and some level of blind faith. So, what belief about yourself or your life had to be challenged or released in order to get to that?
I was going to say the realization of a thought process started to come back to decisions that I was making on my own without things being made for me or threats or, you know what, being financially solvent
Hmm.
again was a really nice thing to realize. Because you don't realize, when you're using how much money you really go through.
Mm,
And then finally, when you stop, you say, wow, but back then it was like, wow, I could buy that $16,000 car. Now it's, wow, I could buy that $60,000 car. Yes, it's material,
yeah.
but it's also a reality point that you never obtained because you're constantly pouring your money out to somebody else.
So, what choice did you realize that you had to make, even if you weren't ready?
I would have had to find another place to live,
Mm,
and somebody that I loved and loved me would have moved on.
right. What about the job?
The job was another thing. The job, I had lost a job, but, I went from a supervisory back to construction. So construction, you're in the mix with the guys again.
Yes.
But now you got to learn not to go to the bar for lunch,
Right.
not to order a couple of tour boys for the train ride on the way home. And you got to stay away from the people who are using.
So,
Y-
what made you decide then to move forward rather than retreat, rather than just go stay or go back?
I was burnt. I was burnt. I was toast. I couldn't
Was that a
sleep.
realization that you recognized at the moment that you were referring to when your wife walked in and saw you? Was that moment? Was that your pivot point moment?
Yeah, yeah, I was toxified. My body was toxified. I didn't know what I felt. And
Mm,
paranoia is a big one. And just not being able to make a decision of what you want to do. Like I was up all night hearing sirens. I thought the neighborhood was burning down.
mm,
It was totally insane. Unless you've been in it, you
yeah,
don't realize.
yeah.
And when you're in it, you don't realize.
So what did you learn about resilience through this whole process? Because you certainly were resilient.
Well, resilience is when you stick around a little while and you see people come and go. Like in the meetings, you see people come and go, and, meeting makers make it. It's another slogan, meeting makers make it. You latch on to somebody who's got some time. You try and work the steps, the 12 steps and the 12 traditions to the best of your ability, whatever program it is. Are you going to be an expert? No. No way. No way. Because even today, as having 35 years, I still got resentments about a lot of things.
Mm,
But if you have friends that are in recovery and somebody that they say, make 90 meetings in 90 days, get 90 phone numbers, dial them, don't file them. All these sayings as you get going, they start to mean things more and more clearly as you go along. But you really have to break through the fear and embarrassment and go for that goal of just giving it a chance or giving yourself a chance, because you really you're giving yourself a chance, and then you gain the trust of your family and your loved ones and your employer if you still got a job.
Well, Vic, we can continue going on, and I just want to take a moment to thank you for coming back and continuing this conversation with such honesty and openness. I know it's not easy to revisit these experiences, and I truly appreciate your willingness to share not just where you've been, but where you are now. And one of the things that really stands out to me is that your story reminds us that pivot points don't end with one moment. Life keeps unfolding, and new turning points show up in different ways at different times. This may be one chapter, but it's certainly not the whole story. So I want you to know, and I want our listeners to hear this as well, the door is always open. If there are other pivot points along the way that you want to explore, reflect on, or share, you're always welcome back here on Pivot Point Strategy for Change. I just want to thank you again for trusting this space.
And from my heart, I want to thank you, because you know how to solicit questions, and you have a good questioning ability, and without your help, I would still not be here today. So I want to thank you.
It's very nice of you.
And wish you a good evening, and thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Very
Thank you again
heartfelt.
for
Thank
trusting
you.
this space and being part of our conversation. And to everyone listening, thank you for being here and for engaging in these stories of resilience, healing, and personal transformation. If this conversation resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe so you don't miss further future episodes. You can find Pivot Point Strategy for Change on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to go deeper into these conversations, you can also find me on Substack. I'm Nick Michael, and I'll see you next time on Pivot Point Strategy for Change. And I will leave you with one question that I'd like to leave everyone with. What's your pivot point?